Are you held to maybe traditional marketing metrics that you don't want to be held to, sales metrics that you think aren't necessarily part of the existing social landscape? Thoughts on?
It's a very long question. I'm kind of, I mean, I do a lot, I have a lot of people, I get frustrated when somebody says all you need is social and inbound strategy and outbound is a thing of the past. I think you need both inbound and outbound together. A nice winning formula of the two. For example, you know, we write a lot of great content, I think. I spend a lot of time writing posts, blog posts that are engaging, and I promote those through Twitter, I promote those through Facebook, PPC, whatnot, and you know, so we have the organic social aspect of it, but I also use an outbound aspect of it with paid programs to support it, you know, maybe mailings or whatever, but it all comes around it, and so I get measured on the success, like the reach of my campaigns, but I also get measured on the amount of new names that we get engaged with, the new names that get into our sales funnel, and then we automatically score them based on, you know, different aspects and put them into a prospect. Marketo is marketing automation, so it's basically we score prospects that come into our funnel on whether or not they're more likely to buy based on engagement with our website that we track. So I have it kind of easy in B2B. I get, you know, my job is to bring in names and turn those names into prospects, turn those prospects into leads, go into opportunities, and become customers, and then follow up and engage with them, and you know, bring them onto the blog. And so I'm not really sure if I answered the question, but I think the most important thing is to you know, combine inbound and outbound, and that's what I get kind of measured on when it comes to how well I do.
Can I hop in on one point? So the short answer to the what's the question is, how do you measure success of a social media campaign, and is what you're held to and your definition of success two different things? So maybe my definition of social media campaign success is X, but my boss's is Y.
Well, the two sets of spreadsheets, or the two sets of metrics. So I would say that the reason we're sitting here is because hopefully we don't want those two sets. So I think we've all sat in meetings where somebody says, I need to show this pie chart and this graph and this and that, even if it's meaningless, even if the data is useless if you kick it. So I get a little frustrated when I hear people talking and sort of advocating for two sets of metrics, because I think it's not to anyone's advantage to have two sets of metrics. However, I realize that there are a lot of people who need to have that to sort of get it through the front door. One thing I think that's missing, and with all due respect, I think you have a lot of very valid points. You can talk about your inbound and outbound. One thing you're not talking about is offline. So, and that's where the authenticity comes in. So, no matter what you do, we talked about this earlier, and I said, I know Janet. How do I know Janet? Janet from Marketo. I have no idea, but just sort of that recognition of knowing somebody beyond just seeing their tweets or reading their blog posts, I think that's huge. We talk about it a lot as if it's disconnected, as if I can crank up some digital campaign without, you know, ever having somebody show up in a real world forum and have to speak to those questions and numbers. And I think that that's sort of the third component that's missing from a lot of the dialogue.
That was good. That was a tough one to follow up. No, that was good. So at Buddy Media, we measure success based on our client success. So the metrics that we hold ourselves to are the same ones that we deliver on for our clients. And depending on their objectives, it could be something like driving fan engagement, or increasing awareness, or creating more conversions for a B2B brand around a particular activity. I think that some of the most successful campaigns are the ones that have multiple metrics to represent the flow or the funnel that is authentic both offline and online as you're developing and launching that campaign. So early on it may be likes, it may be acquisition of fans. As you mature through that campaign, it may be something a little bit more substantial or complex that reflects the engagement, the sharing of the content, and then the attribution of the value of that content. So the metrics that we hold ourselves to are the ones that we guide our relationship with our clients, the ones that we operate our business on, but ultimately it's tied to the goals of the campaign, or more broadly, the goals of the brand strategy.
I think two metrics come to mind. Engagement. So we Sean Roberts, who's our marketing director, is sitting in the back. We're really strict with him on getting more people to engage with our brand. But we also,
He does a great job, by the way, offline and online. I think almost anyone would know his name associated with your brand.
Right. And I really like him too. No, but it's right. It's engagement. Who's engaging with your brand? Are those the right people? And also, who are your amplifiers? Right? Are they in the right community? Do they know the right people? So you mentioned Janet from Marketo, right? Like, you have no idea how you know her, but she's amplified. Like, she has a gigantic network and is saying obviously the right things or something right for you to even notice her. So how do you help find the right people that are amplifying your brand? And at People Browser and Cred, that's like just a quick example.
What's Janet's Cred score?
I have no idea. We can look it up though. Well, like SAP, we hold it ourselves to the same accountability of they had low following with low engagement, and we were able to take that from say 3% to 15% overall. And so we hope we can do that of the followers. When we tweet something out or we post something, what's really the engagement, and more particularly who's engaging with us. So engagement and amplification.
Follow up, 3% to 15%. What?
Engagement.
What does that mean?
So say
Define that.
Yeah. So say so they had 10,000 followers, right? Of those followers, every time they tweeted out, only 3% of those people would engage with that content.
What is engage?
Engage, like retweet, respond, anything like that over the course of say,
I would say 3% is not bad for 10,000.
How does that?
Yeah, but over time, the average engagement for them, they would post the same thing at ideal times during the day, because we were tracking that as well. They were able to raise that to 15% overall with 40,000 followers, which is. It took us about 6 months, but it was really it was finding the right people to engage with the brand and to follow the brand, and they were going for a very specific curated audience, and also had loads of content that was very useful to those people, right? So it was more of for us, it was a way for for us to help them build a community, right? It's really, that's what it is. It's just a community of people that was their target audience, and they found a lot of value from it.
All right, so switching gears a little bit, how important do you think sentiment is in terms of being a component of social analytics?
So yeah, I think sentiment's very, very important to decide. Depends a lot on the size of your brand, because if you're talking about really small number of mentions, you're going to get a lot of false positives, a lot of false negatives. If you're looking at something very broad, like iPhone, Siri, or a very specific product release, or Madonna at the Super Bowl, you're going to get a general direction. So I think the idea is not to focus so much on finding, the exact number. 64% of it of people think it's positive, negative, or neutral. I think it's the idea that it's a guide. It's a rough guide. The other thing I want to point out is so many of the metrics that I've looked at, or the tools that I've looked at, the sentiment's horrible. And that's okay, because when you think about demographics, what I say in one area has a very different meaning than what I say if I'm going to a Knicks game. So we have to build in some demographics and some who said it, where did they say it, in what context, versus I'm watching the Super Bowl in Omaha, or am I, in India watching a cricket match. So I just think it's a guide. It's not an exact science. It probably will never be, but it's a pretty good guide for a big brand.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sentiment alone is not going to give you the direction or the guidance that you need to understand the conversations that are happening about your brand. There are some really sophisticated sentiment analysis tools, some that are automated, some that aren't. Even the automated ones are good at some things, and the manual tools are good at others. So it's tough to find one comprehensive sentiment analysis tool, but there are some good ones out there. The word of caution is to not use them as an absolute, but to use them in context. So it is important to understand the volume of conversation, but also the disposition of that conversation, where it's happening, who's driving it, where they're coming from, and what, more importantly, are they responding to. So what type of content, what type of offer, what type of opportunity to relate to your brand. And putting all of that together, sentiment can be an extremely helpful qualifier to the level of conversation.
A quick question for the audience. I know just about everyone here is in social media of some part. How many of you value sentiment by show of hands for your brand or for something? I'm not actually seeing a lot of hands. See, this is interesting. I think, you know, for smaller brands that don't have a high amount of volume, I don't think that sentiment is a good measure. I think that interaction or engagement or something like that, especially if you're managing a big community, you know, I would say other measures would definitely take precedence over sentiment. But you know, if you wanted, yeah, it definitely can add dimension. But you know, unless you're doing like human sentiment, right? Like mechanical turking something, it's never going to be totally right. And that's what you said.
Mechanical Turks are
I mean, that's the best I've seen, and you know, and yeah, you're exactly right. Even they are right. So I don't think any company. I mean, definitely some companies like Viral Heat are tackling this full on, but you know, it's just not right yet. And depending on you know context and you know what campaign you're running or
But
what.
I could promise you, Madonna and Super Bowl, you would get a very good guide of how people feel on a very general level. And sitting in, I don't know, where's Chris and Christy? Sitting in at their house watching the Super Bowl, it was really interesting to see the demographics breakdown. If I were a brand, I want to know that. Like, how do women feel? How do people who grew up in the 80s feel? How do men feel? So that's what's interesting, right? That was a really, really targeted, very well-targeted approach to a very specific demographic. There were other people who just weren't having it.
And I think you probably said it the best leading this off. It's all about context.
I'm just going to say, I mean, sentiment analysis can be very important. You had like a big PR disaster or something like that. So like the Tylenol thing from many years ago, or you know the exposed whatever in the Super Bowl commercial, you know, went down. And so you try and pull back out of it, and you want to take a reading. Okay, how are we doing? You know, did we apologize loud enough, or did we give enough back to our community or whatever? So I would think that you know, in disaster control, tools like this would be enormously beneficial, rather than just kind of, you know, just general everyday kind of stuff.
I agree with you, and also there are other ways to mention, like to find those people, right? So if you see a huge spark of conversation, I mean, you know, that's when you have massive amounts of volume. And sentiment can be useful, but it doesn't actually help you address the problem unless you can find like the specific post or what's happening or where the source of that is coming from.
Yeah.
So then something like retweet acceleration or engagement or other metrics are more important than something like sentiment.
What about what goes on off of Twitter?
Pardon?
What about what goes on off of Twitter and other places?
I mean, even
Facebook being a tiny little guy out there.
Well, Facebook is great. I mean, you can talk about Facebook sentiment. I don't know. I mean, we have the public feed, but you know, internally, like you guys measure sentiment.
We do, and there are a lot of companies that measure sentiment, but I think sentiment is also really helpful in a less digital realm, looking at like just general natural language processing technology, call phone records, I mean, other ways that consumers engage with a brand that drive directly to customer satisfaction, loyalty, willingness to recommend, net promoter scores, those types of metrics I think are an extension of sentiment, also predating sentiment analysis tools to a large degree. So there are a lot of different ways to get a sense for the nuance and the tone and the feeling that consumers have around your brand. And it really depends on what type of data you have that's available and how you can apply those tools to the data sets that are accessible to you. But whether it's Facebook or Google or your email list that you survey and capture responses to, I think sentiment is one element. It becomes more important at certain times for certain brands, but I don't think it's going away. Consumer sentiment hopefully never will. The ways that we capture it will probably become more sophisticated.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think there's a certain threshold you need to meet to actually make sentiment analysis even worth your time. I mean, we get thousands of mentions in the social world, and I don't think I've ever even looked at the sentiment. I mean, I know what the sentiment is by being aware of what's going on out there. If there's a bad tweet or a bad blog post, it'll show up in my monitoring. I'll take care of it right away. I'll take care of it within, the hour. Do I need sentiment analysis to tell me that 2 people this week out of, 2,000, didn't like my brand? No, I've already taken care of it. But again, when it gets to, when it gets to a magnitude where you can't, comprehend or you can't monitor everything that's being said about you, it's extremely useful. But again, it's an imperfect science, and it really can't get the tone of your tweet, and those end up neutral, and that doesn't really help anybody. Now, on a micro level, I was on a Focus roundtable a while ago, and they had a little sentiment analysis thing going during the webinar, and I thought that was cool because you could see if people were enjoying the topic that was being discussed or the question. I felt bad for this one guy because it was like down in the red, like running on empty his entire whole spiel. But I thought, on a micro level, there was 200 people there, and you could tell. I mean, Focus probably won't answer that. Well, they'll probably tweak that guy's messaging on the next webinar. But it was really interesting to see what was reacting, and I think you could really, benefit from that on a micro level and on a huge, giant macro level.
Seems like sentiment is a fun and popular topic and probably a larger discussion. So from that, how do you track and qualify social leads at your current organization or anywhere else that you've been responsible for that?
Again, this is right up my alley. I mean, this is what we do. We're lead management, so.
I did the question just for you, Jason.
Thank you. I'll try to make this quick and painless, but we take leads from, I run like Twitter ads in the social world on a really good blog post. We tweet it out, it gets a good response. We have 50,000 followers or whatever. It gets some good traction, but I amplify that by running a promoted tweet, and I A/B test these tweets for the best messaging, and I'm not kidding. I've gotten up to a 14% click-through rate on a promoted tweet, and that's outstanding with a 13% conversion rate. I mean, it's remarkable. So,
Wait, can you explain how you define conversion?
we divide, we divide the cost by the actual number of click-throughs.
So it's not an actual conversion to a sale.
No, how we work at Marketo is we have a thing called the revenue cycle. So we have the open funnel at the top, which is just names. Names is exactly what you would think it is. Everybody in the world. Those names come in through a form, through a piece of content that we have on a Twitter ad or a Facebook ad or wherever I put this thing out there, our blog, a PPC ad, and then we automatically, in Marketo, we qualify that person based on their job title, what company they work for. We do reverse API, or reverse website lookup, and we qualify that person into a prospect. Now we track that person when they come to our website and what they engage with, and we score them. So if they watch a webinar, we'll give them 10 points. If they comment on the blog, we'll give them 15 points. If they retweet us, we'll give them 2 points. And when they reach a certain threshold, let's say like 60, then we know that they're more ready for a sale, so we pass them along to our sales. So it goes names, lead, prospect, lead, opportunity, sale. And that's how we work. But so we qualify the leads by pulling them in. We find the original lead source, be it Twitter, Facebook, the blog, PPC. We qualify them, and then we put them in our funnel, and then we sync them back to Salesforce, and we amend what we have in Salesforce with them. And then many times we identify anonymous leads, and we build a complete profile on this person, and we engage with them with the exact content they're looking for, the exact time in their buying cycle.
Really?
Yeah.
No one else?
I can talk a little bit. So we use Zoho internally, for when people convert or sign up for the platform. There's a trial period. As I mentioned earlier, with our specific sign up, people can sign up via their @name, and then we use Cred to sort them by influence and outreach, and then also by community. So if they have high, if they're really active in the CEO community or have a really high outreach score, which is, again, their propensity to respond, we'll reach out to those people and prioritize getting to them before others.
All right, so if I have limited resources for social media, how would you recommend that I use them in terms of analytics?
Short answer, I say you start with Facebook because that's where the numbers are. It's silly to ignore it, and it's fairly, I don't want to say simple, but it's a lot easier than a lot of other networks to get up to speed. I'd say the second place would be Google Analytics. Again, a lot of information out there. There's a lot you can do with it, and I don't think that people are giving enough, what's the word, credence, cred, whatever, to looking at how, again, and I said this a couple of times, how Google Plus and how the analytics will actually influence what people are looking at, because search is a behemoth, right? And my mom still uses search to find something. So I think to ignore the SEO component would be saying too much. You could very easily do Facebook and Google Analytics and on a shoestring budget. But I will say one thing, and this came up offline a little bit earlier this evening. There's got to be, you've got to look at the human resource cost. Everybody looks at the cost all in, you know, like the numbers. Well, if you have an employee who is already getting paid X amount of dollars and you're going to throw this whole new strategy at them, that's a whole nother cost. There's a learning curve, there's time spent, and there's actually perhaps the need for more manpower than people realize. So with that.
That's great. Cost efficiency, definitely key. I think focusing on the analytics that you're actually going to be able to act upon are the ones that are the most valuable, and it may be 3 data sets, it may be 3 data points, but if you can't act on them, those sets of data are going to be extremely expensive to your whole organization. Facebook Insights, Google Analytics, there are a lot of free sources of analytics that are actually quite good. So figure out what your organization needs, figure out how you're going to act upon that information, and then make investments that you can scale as you grow your strategy.
I would say, I mean, when I first started in social, you can start for free if you just are creative enough. I mean, Social Mention is free. That's, I mean, it's not perfect, but it gives you a little bit of sentiment, a little bit of blog analysis. It gives you everything you need. Then, but I would say number one would write a blog. It's simple. Put your thoughts out there. If you're starting a business, that means you're solving someone's problem. So then you have something to say that people are going to be searching on. Then buy a little book on SEO. SEO is very technical, but the major aspects of it that get indexed in Google are very easy to figure out. 3 links, a few keywords here and there, kind of a simple formula for your blog. And then Facebook, Google Plus, Twitter, and then some simple Google Analytics and watch referring traffic. That didn't cost me anything except a little bit of time, a little bit of creativity.
Yeah, I would also probably go the blog route. Also, video is something that can
I missed that. Absolutely.
You can go viral, or video can spread like crazy, and it's also a really easy way to explain your message and get your message across. You'll see animated video going across the web, but you could just do it of yourself. Address the problem that you're solving, and provide that information to people. Also, you'll see Gary Vee. He just did Gary Vee, as if all of you don't know, is probably one of the most prolific people in social media around turning a blog business into multi-million-dollar business down the road. But he started with a blog, and video needed how-to, and he helped people solve problems and educated a lot of people about a variety of different topics, and also used cred. You can find people that
So we're going to use we're going to throw credit in there.
Right.
Let's be honest. So did Gary Vee build a business around wine or around being a speaker and his credit?
He built a business around wine, and also, his wine business now.
Do you know the revenues around his wine business versus his speaking?
He's now a great consultant, and VaynerMedia is more profitable.
So you're not paying him for wine tasting?
No.
Okay.